So I just got back from Lake Norman. This was what is the second stop of the 2010 FLW Tour, and I ended up having a really good tournament. Although it didn't start off that way, kind of like Table Rock, it's the same deal. I'm really making it hard on myself, I guess, and I'm having to play catch up in these events. But you know, for me, when I got there and I practiced, I hadn't seen the south part of the lake. The only part of the lake that I'd ever seen before was the river, and it's real narrow up there, and the fish is just like a river. However, I looked at my practice and I said, you know, I'm not going to go up there until the last day. I want to learn more about the south end of the lake and see what it has to offer. I spent my first day fishing down south and basically skipping boat docks, and I was fishing a Jackal Flick Shake again, the same bait that really did well for me out at Table Rock. I fished both a 4.8 and a 5.8. This is the 4.8 in watermelon color, and I'd rig it wacky style to skip it up underneath the boat docks, and then I'd rig it on the shaky head to fish out a little bit deeper. But I ended up spending my second day up in an area called Reed Creek, and it's really the biggest creek on the lake. It's actually almost like a lake in and of itself. When I went in that creek, I started out throwing the shaky head around again, and I figured the fish would probably be on points leading up into pockets where they might want to spawn, and I primarily was looking for largemouth, and if I'd caught some spots, great. But when I got there, I ended up catching some fairly decent spots. I was catching some 2-pound spots. I even caught a 3-pounder, and it kind of got me started thinking that, well, maybe you know, you can pattern these spotted bass, and so that was kind of encouraging. The last day of practice, I spent half of the tournament, or half of that day, in a place called Mountain Creek, and it was a dirty water creek down on the south side, south of the 150 bridge, and it really looked like good largemouth water. It had really good color to it. There were a lot of docks, a lot of rocks, there was a lot of riprap, and the day that I went in there, it was cloudy and it was also windy, so I ended up throwing a moving bait. And in those conditions, I like to throw a crankbait, and you know, really my go-to bait in practice, and I've caught a lot of fish on this deal, is the Jackal Aragon, the medium runner, and this bait will go down about 5 to 7 feet, and I was fishing it on like 10-pound line, and I'd fish it around rock, anywhere I had wind blowing up on a rocky point, or you know, a seawall that had rock around it, or any kind of laydown or wood. I mean, you can run this bait right into the wood, bang it off the wood, and usually you'll get a strike, a reaction strike from these fish, either coming off the rock or the wood. This thing is really noisy. It makes like a clacking sound because of its jointed body. And I was using a red color and then the chartreuse shad. If the water was a little bit cleaner, I'd go to this, but if it was dirtier, then I'd use red. And I ended up really getting some decent bites. I had a couple that were like 2 3/4 pounds, 2.5 pounds, good largemouth that I was really happy about. But it was a conditional deal, you know, and if the wind wasn't blowing, you had to catch them like on a shaky head in those same areas. Going into the tournament on the first day, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go for largemouth. The spots, I felt like I could catch a limit of those. I just didn't know how big they were going to be. I thought maybe it's a way to catch 8 pounds, 9 pounds, and you know, if you get lucky, you get over 10 pounds if you get a good one. I decided to start my day in Mountain Creek, and that was a bad decision for me. That was my first bad decision, and it got me started off in kind of a bad direction. I really didn't fish well the first day. I was real antsy, I was real nervous. Well, I get in there, it's flat calm, and I throw that crankbait around for an hour in some really good looking water, and I don't get a bite on it. And then I pick the shaky head up and I start catching some small fish, and they had to be 14 there, and I'm catching like 12 and 13 inches. At 10:30, I've got a bail on Mountain Creek, and so I said, I'm just going to go back in, I'm going to go to Reed, and I'm going to try to catch some of those spotted bass that were in there, and catch 7, 8, 9 pounds and salvage the day. Well, I get in there, and in my main little area that I wanted to start, and I was fishing these points, you know, that were leading in these pockets. I get in there, and there's already like 3 or 4 boats in there. Scott Suggs is in there, David Dudley's in there, Glenn Brown was in there. And these guys, Glenn was fishing docks, but Scott was fishing the points, and he was fishing offshore, and he's in there calling. I'm seeing him, and as soon as I get there, he's throwing fish out and calling. So I didn't know what he had. Turned out at the end of the day, I think he weighed like 9 pounds or something, maybe 10 pounds. So I get in there, and then I start fishing fast. I get on a point where I'd caught some in practice, and And I get a couple bites, and I might have caught one keeper, but it just wasn't like the day in practice. In practice, I could get 3 or 4 bites right off the bat on these things, and they were up a lot shallower. And I kept trying to force that shallow deal, like in less than 5 feet on the point, when most of those fish had moved off. It got sunny in the afternoon, and a lot of those fish that were up when I was catching them in practice moved out onto the break, and they were sitting anywhere from like 10 to 15 foot. And that's what happens in these deals. I mean, you make some bad decisions, and all of a sudden you're making more bad decisions. And you know, this game is so much about decision making, and I've learned that over the years. And so anyway, I ended up catching 4 keepers that day, fishing way too fast, and I can't get my last keeper. And I had like an hour and a half to do that, and I still couldn't catch the last one. I did lose one. I don't know if it was a keeper or not. It might have been, but regardless, it was just a bad day. So I get back and I weigh in 7 pounds, and they caught the crap out of me. Everybody there, I think 10 something was 50th place. So I'm like 3 pounds out right off the bat on the first day, and I'm sitting in 110th place. And I'm aggravated. I mean, I'm like, you know, I knew going into the tournament that I could catch 10 pounds a day. I felt like 9 to 11 pounds was doable, but I just didn't execute, and I made really bad decisions on the first day. So the next day, I didn't let it bother me. I knew I came back at Table Rock, and I've had other events in the past that when fishing the FLW series that I've been able to come back. So I kept a positive mind. Well, I get in to the creek first thing in the morning, and I go all the way to back of the creek where I had a little point that was kind of the last point before the creek turned into a flat, and it was a little staging area. And I had got some bites on there in practice, and I didn't know how good that little place was, but I figured it was a good place to start. So I get in there, and I make my first cast, and I catch a keeper. And I make another cast, and I catch another keeper. And within an hour, or within maybe 45 minutes, I had a limit. Probably weighed about 8 pounds. And then my co-angler ended up catching 3 or 4 keepers off that spot too. Spot kind of died off a little bit around 9, 10 o'clock, and then I kind of worked my way out into the deeper points in the creek, and I started catching more fish. By the end of the day, I think I weighed in 10 pounds, 9 ounces. So I made a big move from the first day, and I moved up from 110th place to 75th place. And I was feeling good about fishing that last day. I was really like, you know what, I'm going to go out and catch them. But I ended up starting back on that same point again in the morning, and my first 2 casts, I catch 2 3-pounders, and they were 3-pound spots. And I was like, wow, I'm pleasantly surprised. These are some nice fish. So, and then I catch another one about 14 inches. So I've got 3 in the well. I got about 7 pounds in the first, say, 40 minutes of the tournament. And then that point just kind of died out, and I couldn't get any other. I caught some small fish off of it, but I wouldn't catch any keepers. So I started to back out a little bit and work my way out the creek. Again, fishing those points and those channel points. I ended up catching another 3-pounder, and then another one about 3 1/4. So I had 4 really, really good ones, and then I had a small one that I had to call out. My decision was just to keep fishing for spotted bass, and wherever the day ended out, it ended out. So I ended up with 13.10, which turned out to be the tied for the second heaviest bag of the final day of the event. And that made me feel good. I'd made some good adjustments. I went from a bad first day, and I turned the tournament into a really good tournament. So I've got 3 more events to go, and I've got to get focused, and I just got to avoid the bombs and try to catch fish at every tournament. And hopefully, when this is all said and done, I'll make it to the championship. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into my experiences on the water. It's a really cool, there's a lot of camaraderie, and it's fun hanging out with all the pros and your heroes, and it's really neat, and it's been a great experience so far with my rookie season, and I look forward to getting back on the water and competing.